So it was everything I could do not to sprint across the stage. Thank you, John, for getting us energized.
Yeah, John really jacks you up. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. So how many people in the audience here have founded a company? Not that I can see anything. Okay, how many of you had a co-founder? How many of you had 5 co-founders? Okay. So one of the keys of starting any kind of great enterprise at a very early stage is getting a great founding team together, a team that shares your vision, shares your passion, that you don't want to kill, that you can work together at all hours on ramen noodles. Talk to me. How did this team come together? Because you've got 5 founders. How did it happen?
Sure. So 4 of us met in a co-working space, and 3 of the 4, Neil and 2 of his classmates, met at Brown. But the 4 of us were working on different startups, 2 different startups, and kind of just started commiserating over the struggles of startups and talking about different things in the office. One of the main themes just being sleep and how people would pass out on beanbag chairs, would drink a ton of iced coffee, do a bunch of things to try to hack productivity, but never prioritize getting a good night of sleep. And we were randomly assigned to sit next to each other, and we just kept coming back to that topic. And that led to a conversation about how buying mattresses were so terrible. And then I had some background in the mattress space through my first company, which was an e-commerce company that sold mattresses online. And then the 5th co-founder came in, Jeff, and Jeff also had a background in mattresses, and we knew Jeff through Neil, through a classmate of his when he was at medical school at Brown. And between the 5 of us, we thought we had the right kind of rounded out group to go build Casper.
I think what was unique, or at least different about the way that we went and put the team together was that a lot of times you'll have a couple of friends that are working together and all of you want to work on the exact same things, right? And I had done that before. We've known each other for years, and some of our last companies, it was like 4 people who all own technology and marketing and sales and product development, and it's a mess, because everyone's trying to own every part of everything. And we kind of took the opposite approach. For us, it was very much like each of us can own a different part of the business, and that's what allowed us to launch so fast. From the time that we had the idea to launch was just maybe, 7 months?
Yep.
7 or 8 months. And so it allowed us to kind of go out, brainstorm, come up with a product, come up with the brand, the marketing, the website, and everything, and kind of sprint to the races in a time period that was probably a lot shorter than we would have been able to do otherwise.
Yeah, a very clear divide and conquer, which still serves us well as we're building out teams because everyone owns a different part of the business, and we work really closely together, but can go out and conquer all the different things it takes to scale quickly.
So with that big group at an early stage, coming up with a name for a brand, how did that come about? How did we come up with Casper?
So one of our co-founders, Luke, at the time had a roommate named Casper. It's actually Casper with a K, and we all thought it was pretty funny that he didn't fit on the bed that he had. So he was like a 6'6" guy who was sleeping on a twin bed. And we all got a good laugh about that and kept coming back to the idea of Casper when we were trying to come up with the name, and that's just what stuck.
I wish there were a genius story.
I know.
So you've talked how quickly you guys have grown, and I would argue that there's probably no better easy example of entrepreneurialism, of taking an entrepreneurial mindset and a new attitude towards an old industry. I mean, I think beds have been around for a while, and a pretty staid industry right now. And talk to me about how you've done that and how you've made that happen and kind of upending an industry like that.
Yeah, I think, like what was talked about with the finance industry, and there's many industries like it, the entrenched guys are making a ton of money, and they've built a system where it's very difficult to, or where an outsider, it's very difficult to change things, and where the insiders don't want to change it. So the mattress industry is very much an oligopoly on the manufacturing side. There's 2 parent companies. One's public, Tempur Sealy, and the other's private equity owned that owns Simmons and Serta. And between those 2 manufacturers, they control over 70% of manufacturing share. So they work very closely to make sure that margins stay high and that consumers stay in the dark. And so that's why every retailer out there can advertise lowest price guaranteed, because those manufacturers will work with retailers that are very regionally dominant to make sure that margins stay high and consumers end up spending a lot more money than they have to get a great night of sleep. And I think that's why the direct-to-consumer model worked really well for us, is that we were able to circumvent traditional retail channels, sell direct through Casper.com, and change an industry that hasn't been changed in a very long time.
I was going to say, just adding on to that, speaking about, today we've talked a lot about competition, what makes, what's going to protect you in the long term as well as positivity. And I think that's actually the core of what our brand stands for, right? No one aspires to buy a mattress at a mattress store down the street and walks in and says, yes, take my money, please. I'm so excited to have to wait 4 hours for this to arrive, maybe, possibly one day. And for us, at the very beginning, it was two things that we wanted to focus on. One is to create a lifestyle brand around sleep in general, right? Not just about the actual mattress. And the mattress is interesting because that business is fundamentally broken. But to expand that outwards and say, why don't we positively think about sleep in general, right? It's not cool to sleep 4 hours a night anymore. Instead, we're tracking it on our Fitbits and our Jawbones, and we're trying to optimize on it, and we're trying to live healthier lives. And so there has to be an opportunity to create something much bigger around sleep in general. But also in terms of positive customer experience, to flip that entire mentality on its head, right? If you interact with someone on our CX team, they're not commissioned. We very much from the beginning came up with the approach of saying, like, how do we create the most positive experience you can possibly have? Because we only have one chance to get it right? Like, you're only going to buy a mattress probably like once in 10 years. And so if we screw it up, you're going to go and tell everyone. And so on the opposite side, if we create an amazing experience, something that's you've never been able to have before, you're also going to go and tell your friends.
Speak for yourself. I got 3 of these now. So, in terms of that customer experience, my experience with you guys is that you are relentless from design, delivery, and on after in terms of the customer and your focus on the customer. How have you maintained that as you've continued to grow when, from when you were selling 10 mattresses to now? How have you maintained that?
Yeah, I think that was kind of one of the fundamental beliefs that we had going into Casper, was that you have to build a customer-centric organization, and that every aspect of what we do should be focused on how to improve the customer experience. And I think that's a very big differentiation than our competitors. Traditional mattress retailers very much looked at it as kind of a one-and-done relationship where they sold you something and didn't have any desire to try to maintain a relationship because it is such an infrequent purchase. And I think we've taken the opposite approach, where if we can build a real long-term relationship with the customer, sure, there'll be other opportunities to monetize that relationship, but reality is that you ask your friends about what kind of mattress to buy. Referrals are a really big part of this category. It is a very considered purchase, and so you try to get a lot of inputs on it. And so from day one, we took a very long-term approach to the relationship that we wanted to build with the customer, both through the products that we deliver and just the experience and the content and everything else that we put around that.
I'll tell you a story. Our first month, we ended up selling probably like equivalent to like our 2 years worth of projections, right? Remember, we were on the phone. It's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have no idea how to make this many beds, because we're working with mom and pop shops, and for the most part at that time it was anyone who would want to work with us. And so my point being, a lot of things we just had to figure out along the way, right? We had sold all these mattresses and promised people, like, we're going to get these to you relatively quickly. Realized there's no way we could possibly do this. And this is different than, like, getting a pair of shoes 2 weeks late, right? If you're moving into a new apartment or a home and you have nothing to sleep on, you're going to be sleeping on the floor, and there are going to be a lot of angry people. And so we just had to be extremely reactive, right? We realized, let's just go and overnight anyone that doesn't have a bed, an airbed from Amazon, so at least they have something to sleep on. And then Amazon kept shutting off our accounts because they kept thinking we were trying to resell airbeds for a while. But you just have to be responsive and kind of figure it out, and figure out, like, walk in the shoes of your customer for a little bit and figure out how to make their life easier.
So what is this Casper Labs that I keep reading about and hearing about?
Yeah, Casper Labs is a cool program that we started and launched that now has, I think, over 13,000 people that opted in to help us with things like beta testing new products, getting more information about how people interact with sleep in their personal lives, understanding more how people are using technology to track sleep. And it really came, the genesis of it was that when we were developing our first product, the first mattress, Jeff, one of our co-founders, is head of product design and came from IDEO. IDEO uses a very kind of user-centric design philosophy where it's very much based, an iterative design process based on user feedback. And for us, it was a struggle to get that kind of feedback before we had launched. No one knew who we were. We would beg all of our friends to come and lay on the bed and give us feedback and buy pizza and beer to do that. And when we started developing new products, we now realize that we have this awesome customer base. These people are really passionate about the brand and they want to give us feedback. So we launched Casper Labs to have people kind of opt in and help us just think about things in a much more broad view and a very user-focused view, whether it's new products or talking to people who are aggressive sleep trackers and understanding the difference when they track via a Fitbit or a Jawbone and just things like that. So it's been an awesome program, way more successful than we ever expected, and people really love it and they're happy to help.
And so part of, I think, what's so cool about Casper is how artfully you guys tell the story and how you present it to everyone. Does Casper Labs flow into that, or just how do you maintain that artistry of telling the story of what you are and who you are?
I think it probably started with just being told no on pitches over and over and over. So you get very good when you're fundraising about telling the story because you get constant feedback. And especially when we were raising our first round, our seed round, before we had launched, we met with dozens and dozens of investors. And it took a long time before we found the first person to say yes, which was Ben Lear, and he ultimately led the round. Even after that, it's a continuous game of kind of telling your story, and I think it's just something that you evolve over time and you get better with the more you do it. But for us, it's fun to sell a consumer product. It's fun to sell a product that everyone can relate to. It's awesome to be in a category where everyone has a very personalized relationship with sleep. And so it's an easy story to tell at the end of the day.
So let's talk about raising money a little bit. And
Don't do it.
Yeah.
you guys are sitting there with a deck and a business plan, and the five of you, and a 6'6" inspiration, and starting a business like this is not one where you can just sit around and do it on $5,000 or $10,000. You need a lot of money. How did you kind of hit the ground? Because I think even your story of talking to 20, 30 investors, you guys did it very quickly and did it very well. How'd you do that with your seed round?
It did not feel very quick at the time. It took a long time. It took probably the better part of 6 months before we were introduced to Ben, and it was definitely a game of perseverance. And to John's point about grit, we knew we wanted to raise money. We knew it was critical to the business that we wanted to build. But it was definitely a struggle. It's the first question is like mattresses. Why? How is that venture backed? How does that tech enabled? It didn't make any sense. The next question is, okay, so you're building this brand. Brand's really important. Show us your brand. We had nothing to show, and so it was a challenge. But I think it forced us to really think about all of the aspects that we knew it would take to be successful. Forced us to think about the brand that we wanted and how do you articulate that without the visuals. Forced us to think about the product that you want. And why that would be differentiated and special. And, it I think was a great challenge because it forced us to focus what we wanted to do and be very focused on what we were going to launch with. And fortunately, we met Ben, who really did believe in the vision and believed that the mattress market was ripe for disruption and that we were the guys that were going to do it. And it was certainly a leap of faith on his part. But he got what we wanted to do and supported us, and that gave us the confidence to keep going and launch the business that we have today.
So it's not always all rosy. Were there any pitfalls or anything that if you could change the way you did it when you were raising that seed, you'd do it all over again? And I may not be sure about asking this question, but let's anything like that if you could just do it all over again, you would.
I think part of it is you have to have so much conviction about what you want to do. There were definitely times when, we'd walk out of a meeting and someone say, that's a dumb idea. Selling mattresses online is never going to work. ha, suckers now. No, I'm kidding. But, when you have not that much to show at the moment besides an idea and a concept and some stuff that you've worked on, but you have a very strong vision and a passion for something that you want to work on, and someone says no to you. And I think that part, there were definitely times when we looked at each other and we said, like, are we crazy? Like, is this actually a good idea? And so that's not something I don't think that we would change. But I think that as you're going through it, everyone, like, the job of an investor to some extent is to poke holes in what you're doing to try to figure out, do you know what you're talking about? Because oftentimes, everyone today has said, find people who are smarter than you are going to help you build that business. Well, most investors don't really know about the businesses that they're investing in, and so you kind of have to show them that you know what you're talking about. But that means that you're just going to get a lot of, like, very difficult questions and people who sound like they're poking holes at every little thing that you want to do. And if you believe in something, you just have to kind of keep doing it.
So I think the whole point of entrepreneurship is that you're charting your own course. There's no kind of playbook to follow. And so I think every step of the way there are things that we would do different, from the seed round to how we're operating today. And the whole point is that you're supposed to learn and you'll make mistakes. And we certainly made a ton of mistakes and continue to. But we know that there's no playbook that we're following. And so we know that we'll make mistakes. And so I think we have kind of good perspective on that and look to identify those mistakes as quickly as possible. And that's one of the fun parts of 5 co-founders. There's always someone to point that out very quickly. But the idea is that we're just moving forward and we all kind of are rowing in the right direction, and we will keep finding things that we do differently, but as long as we're kind of aiming for the right North Star, then we should get there.
I think that speaking of things that we would do the same, which is not a question I get asked very often, but one of the things I think about a lot is how important some of the first people we ever hired were. We realize that we have a certain set of skill sets, right? And you think for a long time that you can do everything, and you quickly realize that's definitely not possible. And so very early on, we realized, like, hey, we know nothing about how to talk to the press. I don't even know where you would possibly talk to a reporter, how you would find those people, how to manage a PR agency, et cetera. And so we just found a lot of people that were, like, very good at specific skill sets around marketing, acquisition marketing, how to build a really good customer experience team, and people who care deeply about how to manage those people. And that's something I definitely wouldn't change another time if we were to do it again, right? Finding people who have very specific skill sets that are going to be important for your growth early on and investing in those people.
Great. And so we talked a lot about how many people said no to you when you were raising money. And then I think you were in a great position because of the massive growth that you had seen because of your early problem of, we've already hit all of our numbers 2 months in, and, this is a ginormous problem for us. And there were people, I would assume, lining up to talk to you about how can we help, how can we invest in you. How did you pick and how did you build that investor base?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit cliche, but like who you have around you is certainly one of the most important things, and that's both to Neil's point, who you hire, which we take very, very important and spend a ton of time working on, and the same goes with your investors and who you have around you whether it's the board or just on your cap table. And so we, both our kind of Series Seed round and our A round were a bit of shotgun weddings where we made decisions very quickly. With our B round, we had a bit more time, so we got to know the investors a bit better, but we knew who we were kind of optimizing for. With our A round, we wanted a big fund. We knew we had a big opportunity, and we really wanted to swing for the fences, and we wanted a big fund that could be there to support us. And we were lucky to be introduced. Actually, we were introduced to Amit and NEA in our seed round, and they actually passed on the seed round and ultimately led our A round. But it was because we got to know them through the seed round and how they thought about the business and how they treated us, and then getting to know Tony, who was the GP that led the A round. They were just awesome guys who really got our vision, talked about how they supported other companies that had gone well and other companies that had not gone well. We talked to the entrepreneurs that they worked with, and everyone spoke really highly about them. And NEA is a firm with a 30-year track record, and really it supported their companies and entrepreneurs through up and down cycles and through up and downs of the companies. And that was something that was really important for us. We knew that while our launch had gone well, that every company has their ups and downs, and we really wanted a fund who had been through cycles and had supported companies even when times got tough, because we know that's an inevitability. And so it was just about kind of figuring out what we were optimizing for when it came to finding funding partners. And there's no right or wrong, I think, answer on what you want to solve for, but it's just going in knowing what's important to you, whether you want a firm that's maybe more founder friendly, maybe more aggressive, if pricing is what you're optimizing around. There's a bunch of variables in any fundraise, but I think we were pretty thoughtful about what was important to us, and then that's what we went out to try to find, and so far so good. We're really happy with everyone that we work with, and everyone's been super supportive.
So speaking of everyone that you work with, you've got some blue chip, terrific institutional investors. You also have a lot of really interesting celebrities that have invested, and I'm sure a lot of the people in the audience would love to know what it's like to have some of those people as investors, and why you chose to go that route, because you had choices. Talk to me.
Yeah, for sure. So we do have a handful of celebrities that have come in through like the A and B round. And for us, it's great to work with them. One, celebrities are really good at kind of understanding the consumer landscape and how to really market anything, whether it's themselves or products, et cetera. So for the most part, they're really thoughtful on that front. For us, it just helps build kind of awareness for what we're doing, and the press loves that we have celebrities, so it helps us get more reach there. And the celebrities, I think one of the cool things about the product that we're selling is that everyone, celebrity or institutional investor, whatever it may be, gets that buying a mattress today is a terrible consumer experience, and it's a huge market. Over $14 billion a year is spent on mattresses in the US alone, another $10 billion on sleep accessories. And so whether you're a celebrity or investor, everyone gets that it's a really big opportunity. It's really terrible today, and that the way we've approached it makes a ton of sense. And so it was an easy pitch, relative to them, and for us, they're very accretive to our business.
Right, so now that you have all this money and you're growing and you're scaling so rapidly and facing all of these challenges, which admittedly are quality problems, but in growing your team, one thing that has always impressed me about everyone I've ever met from Casper is that you guys, in the same way you're relentlessly focused on the customer, you've also built a culture there at Casper that is incredible. And there are stories of, companies like Google and things like that, where the founders, even as the company got to thousands of employees, are still involved in every key hire. How involved are you guys in this hiring process, and how much time do you spend on maintaining that culture?
A lot. I'd say probably for both of us, we spend north of 50 to 75% of our time on hiring. I mean, every single person that is at Casper has been interviewed by one of the five of us, including every person that's on our customer experience team still gets interviewed by one of us. Because it's, in the grand scheme of things, right, we look at it like we're a family meets a high-performance athletics team, right? Everyone has to rely on one another through the times that are difficult, through the times that are easy. Because if you imagine, we're just over 18 months from the time that we launch now. And so even if you have someone that's amazing or someone that's not amazing there for 6 months, they've been there for a third of our existence, right? And so we have to be super careful because things are changing so quickly day to day. And at the beginning, and it's why it's even more important now, it was very osmotic. Like, we used to work out of an apartment on Bond Street. It was like 1,500 square feet. There was like one long table and 30 of us just sitting around. And so just us, the way in which we would talk to one another, the way we would take meetings, everyone would just understand, through osmosis. Now, when, we're over 100 people, we're in 3 offices around the country, we have to be a little bit more deliberate about the way that we're imparting that culture on people. And so that's why we're still very involved in it.
Yeah, and I would say that's one thing that maybe surprised us or we didn't think about enough. And I think that when earlier stage companies ask us for advice or just things that we learned was that as founders, as soon as you launch, I think one of the things that you should spend most of your time on is hiring, because it's true that whoever you get on board and whoever you surround yourself with will make or break the company. It will define the culture. How they understand how you want to work will define the culture, and it's just super important with everything. I mean, it permeates every decision you make, every interaction with your customer, and just the business that you want to build.
So 2 years ago, we started with, or less than 2 years ago, we started with 5. And how many people are you at right now? Over 100?
Yeah. 110.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there are plans for growth beyond that. How do you deal with attracting the kind of talent in this expensive city, and how do you compete with everyone else here in bringing in that talent, because you can't cut corners with respect to talent?
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, hiring is one of the hardest things that we have to deal with, because there's a bunch of overfunded startups out there that are paying tons of money to get talent, and especially on roles that are harder to come by, whether it's acquisition marketing or product managers, things like that. And you have to be kind of really scrappy with where you're recruiting from, how you're recruiting. We're lucky that we have a brand that's fairly well known in New York City right now, so we're able to go toe-to-toe with some of the bigger employers that have great comp packages, great culture, great perks. But it's really tough. I mean, it's something that we think about a lot, and it's super competitive. And it's still something that we have to be aggressive on and stay competitive.
And I think hiring, one of the things I think we learned during even the interview process is that when you're interviewing someone, you're still selling them, right? A big part of and there's this delicate balance of going back and forth between trying to gauge if someone is the right candidate, but also selling them on the big opportunity, right? I mean, the best people can go work anywhere in the world. And so we have to kind of do a lot of work to convince them that we are going to be the biggest lifestyle brand. We're the first one around sleep, definitely the biggest one around sleep. And that is an incredible opportunity. And that's something that, that there is an entry point here to create what the future looks like. And that's not for everyone, but for the people that do want to be a part of that, we're definitely trying to sell the dream.
So I gotta believe that there are people in this audience that are already compelled. How do they reach out to Casper about coming to work and joining the rocket ship?
So email us, Philip or Neil at casper.com.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.